Okay, thank you very much, Alexis. Apologies to my Greek comrades and friends. My presentation will be in English, so you need your headphones. I will try to answer some of your questions, and my presentation also raises some other issues, and hopefully the rest of the questions that you raised will be answered during the discussion. So let's start. A democratic way of producing, distributing and consuming energy, but also democracy as the framework in which important decisions regarding energy projects are taken and energy resources are handled.
That's too fast.
Yeah, okay. Is a concept that currently transcends horizontally the energy sector in Greece. The struggle for democracy in the energy sector is not an abstract notion, but an existing reality, although sometimes it is not identified as such. In my short intervention yesterday, I mentioned two main characteristics of the current political situation in Greece. The one being that the country is under the memorandum policies and the crisis that comes with it. And the second one is the prospect of the government of the left. So with these two special characteristics in mind, I have identified and focused on four main issues regarding energy democracy in the current political and social reality in Greece. I will say a few words about each of these four. The first one is the price of energy and the people's accessibility to basic energy services, and the right to energy. The household and industrial prices of energy have been increased 12 times in the last 4 years, with a cumulative increase of more than 50% in the same period. I don't think I need to get into more specific figures. The presentation in the previous session from Professor Sandamouris was very, very detailed about this. The main argument that is used by the government and the Troika, which has actually been explicitly presented in the relevant Troika reports, is that the prices should be increased in order to reflect the actual cost of production and make the liberalized market more attractive to the new private players. Since July the 1st, 2013, household prices have been fully liberalized, enabling PPC, which still holds 98% of the retail electricity market, to increase the prices without any restrictions. One interesting point here is that due to the unpredicted repercussions of the recession, the sharp reduction of the demand, for example, or the collapse of the renewables sector, there is currently underway an ongoing intra-systemic, all-against-all conflict between the different capitalist interests around the electricity market. Combined with the harsh impact of austerity policies on people's income, the increase in electricity prices and the introduction of new taxes in the electricity bill has made it impossible for thousands of households to cover their needs in energy and heating. Now, the reaction of the left and the movements is twofold. On social level, through the solidarity structures, it supports the households that face an electricity cutoff. And on a political level, the left is trying to raise the issue of electricity price as a matter of democracy. Actually, in this context, SYRIZA, as part of its short-term program for the alleviation of the socially destructive austerity policies, has introduced the right to energy, which will ensure that no individual suffers from energy deprivation. This could take the form of a free basic amount of energy for each individual or household suffering from extreme poverty and social exclusion. The left also identifies and focuses politically on the direct link between the privatization of energy, of the energy sector, and the increase in the price of electricity. At the same time, there is an ongoing internal discussion within the left on the cost of energy and who should pay for it. Everyone agrees that the first priority from a leftist standpoint should be to provide cheap energy for those parts of the society that are currently suffering. However, policies of reduction in energy consumption are of equal importance. Furthermore, it is still in discussion whether industrial consumers should receive price reductions in order to become more competitive, or they should pay more in order to create the space for a gradual transformation to an environmentally friendly and energy efficient production. What I think, I'm just stating my personal view here, is that it should be clear from a leftist perspective is that when it comes to cost, there is no win-win situation. And that means that questions like which industry, with which working environmental conditions, to serve which development model are key questions which have to be treated politically in order to come up with a concrete plan regarding electricity pricing. The second aspect of the energy democracy struggle in Greece that I would like to raise is a struggle against the privatization of all major public energy enterprises, which is one of the great challenges that the left and the trade unions are currently facing in Greece. The privatization process has been in progress in Greece since 1999, but in the last 3 memorandum years it has reached its peak. As it has happened elsewhere, the current model of the public sector management and functioning has been used by the advocates of the free market in order to discredit public enterprises in principle and present the privatization of the public companies as an economically sound and morally justified decision. The left has a difficult role to play in this environment. On one hand, it has to defend the public enterprises as a way for society to control its energy resources and as a precondition for an alternative democratic energy system. And on the other hand, to differentiate from the existing model and propose a completely different structure and management of the public energy corporations with democratic and social control. Now, in this context, the role of PPC, Public Power Corporation, as a public-owned entity in the electricity sector, becomes crucial for any alternative left strategy. Trying to draw the line of such a role could lead us to a suggestion: resist, reclaim, and restructure. These steps should not be felt as a separate in time and space processes. Resisting includes reclaiming and restructuring as well at the same time. The political struggle, which of course should involve local communities, the social movement in general, and trade unions at its core, also the solidarity social structures which have been developed, has to be able to confront the huge forces and needs to create a dynamic platform of democratic negotiation with the different stakeholders, but also be able to draw a strategy in a very quickly changing environment in terms of economical and political environment. The left of the 21st century and the Latin America experience here we can draw many examples from that region, although of course in a rather different historical, political and economical context, needs to develop a new understanding of the concept of public. A new concept of public which will intervene constantly with the social institution in place at the moment, and especially at the time when the question of power materializes. Of course, right now, the social institutions, the collective entities within the society are not extended, have not been able to include the vast majority of the society, and especially of those in need. Nevertheless, we think that the political level determines to a great extent the evolutions in the social level. Therefore, a left government which will manage to put as a top priority the public social control of the PPC and all the publicly owned energy enterprises in oil, gas, natural gas and all the other sectors of energy, is able to shift the paradigm even though contradictions will always be emerging. Now, the third point I wanted to raise, which is directly linked with the publicly controlled public enterprises in the energy sector, is the democratic energy planning. Sometimes, even within the left, there is a misconception that the structural dead ends and the collapse of the electricity energy market in Greece are caused by the lack of energy planning. The reality, however, is completely different. The energy sector has been the subject of severe legislation and regulatory transformations on national and European level during the last 2 decades, which were, of course, based on the political decision to deregulate and privatize the energy sector. What is actually absent, at least in the Greek case, is a holistic strategic bottom-up program of energy planning which would answer the real social, economic, and energy questions. How much energy we need, produced by whom and consumed by whom, for which social and economic needs, and of course, to which environmental cost, and within which development plan. In Greece nowadays, given the strategic goal to tackle climate change and shift to a zero-carbon economy, this plan should take the form of a national energy transition action plan. The question of democratic energy planning, therefore, reflects a broader question of energy democracy, as the main key issue around it is the participation of the society in the planning process. Through the local authorities, local social and environmental movements, citizens' initiatives, cooperative structures, etc. In my view, the main challenge in this area is how to reconstruct and reactivate social structures, probably already in place, as the ones mentioned above, which have been discredited after many decades of exploitation by the bipartisan system. And I'm coming to the fourth and last point, which is probably the most directly linked to the issue of energy democracy, and that's the whole concept of green economy, i.e. the development of the renewable sector, which has been one of the major development plans for Greek capitalism in the last decade. On economic terms, it was seen as the only way to refuel the locomotive of the Greek economy, which has always been the construction sector. One thing that sometimes we miss, and I think it's important, is that on ideological level, green economy was used by the dominant political forces in order to gain consensus by large part of the society, and especially of the petit bourgeoisie, both on the side of ownership and on the side of project execution, from farmers and land and house owners to engineers and small construction companies. On nominal terms, the project has reached its targets. The current national target for the development of photovoltaic installations for 2020, which is 2.2 gigawatt, has already been reached. But on social, economic, and political terms, the situation is completely different. Leaving the development of the sector to the forces of the market and introducing the highest feed-in tariffs in Europe led to an unplanned boom of the renewables. The sector has now collapsed due to the inability of the system to pay the producers. As a result, the licensing process has now been suspended until further notice. More importantly, passing the cost of renewables to all consumers through their electricity bills and the lack of transparency and democratic control of the process of licensing and implementing large-scale renewable projects, threatening crucial ecosystems, local land uses, and productive activities, has created great discontent in the public. It's not, of course, a coincidence that many, if not all, of the major social movements around energy issues that have been developed in Greece in the last few years are local or regional scale initiatives against the construction of large-scale renewable projects in their area. Despite their contradictions and sometimes generalizations, all these movements raise the issue of democracy, or actually the lack of it, in the decision-making process. Many of these large-scale projects have been licensed and constructed through fast-track procedures, i.e. by bypassing the existing environmental and spatial planning legislation, thus conflicting with the main productive activities and the environmental well-being of the local communities. Now, what's an alternative model for the development of renewables as part of a wider social emancipation process? From a leftist perspective, it is obvious that the capitalist plan for the development of the green economy project was not an environmentally or socially driven decision. It was seen as another investment opportunity for the overaccumulated capital. Greece is a great example of this trend, as green economy coexists in the same plan for capitalist growth with the other great national idea of our times, what I would call black economy, i.e. new extractivism, exploitation of potential oil and gas reserves. Within this dominant context, the role of the left is crucial. It has to clarify that the concept of energy democracy at its core is directly linked to renewables, and that the ecological transformation of the economy is not a tactical decision, as it is for the capitalists, nor a purely technological issue, but a strategic goal which is directly linked to the wider concept of social emancipation, both in the sense of decision-making, but also social control and ownership of energy sources. Just finishing off, in that sense, an alternative model for the development of the renewables and the gradual reduction in the dependence on fossil fuels is perceived as part of a deeper transformation of the production process, creating the legal, economic and social framework for the promotion of small-scale, local and decentralized renewable projects, the introduction of new economic and ownership structures, e.g. cooperatives. I'm sure Karel will have many things to add about this. And the democratic and social control of public energy corporations and energy resources should be seen as part of this emancipatory process. Thank you very much.